Hi, welcome back to Wild Speculations. I'm Daniel.
I'm Scott.
This week we're talking about Critical Role Campaign 2, Episode 133, Hunter and Hunted.
Yep.
Good episode. A lot of planning, though.
A lot of planning. Very little in-game time passed.
Yeah.
Especially compared to...
Only 6 hours, maybe? And most of that was spent attempting to... No.
7 at most.
Yeah, 7. Yeah, 7.
And, 4.5, 5 hours. 5 hours or so of that was part of a rest.
Yeah, attempting to get a long rest.
But yeah, we start with initiative.
Yeah.
Clerics go first. That's always a good call.
Well, and I was excited when the thing did the breath weapon. Because I was like, called it.
Yep.
The biggest DM ruling in this episode was in this first section.
Okay.
And it was when Matt said, no, you can't flank the monster. It's on the ceiling, you're down here. My reading of the flanking rules is if you can draw a line through the creature, then you're flanking. And Matt said they could attack it, so they are threatening it. So whether that...
in my mind, where he was coming from was I think the ceiling was just high enough that they could reach it, but that they're like extending to reach it. So it's not like a strategic, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot harder to do that when you're like extending to the utmost.
Well, allow me to turn this on its head, so to speak. Because Caleb at that point was a giant ape.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Matt said that his head was where this thing's feet was. Flip that around, you have a creature that's on the ground, being threatened. Is the PC that's flying 5 feet above it not flanking it?
Fair point. Okay.
If that diagonal still passes through the creature.
Yeah. That's a fair point. That's just where my brain was at. And yeah, that's a fair point. That's how I interpreted Matt's rule call. Flanking is great, but did they really need it?
No.
I mean, this was a resource reducer, and it reduced resources. And that's all the point of this battle of cockroaches was.
Way, way better than Matt, I think, anticipated.
Yeah.
Because Jester, Channel Divinity, duplicate, second level spell, spiritual weapon.
Yep.
And then on her next turn, she didn't even use it.
Yep.
She didn't move it, didn't try to get it in position.
So she wasted the second level spell for all intents and purposes. For all intents and purposes, Yasha wasted a rage.
Yeah.
For all
although she has more to waste in that sense. Barbarian.
Theoretically, if you ask me, Caleb wasted a 4th level spell. Yes, he was at 7 hit points, but it would have been just as effective, in my opinion, for him to back the fuck up and hit it with a cantrip, Firebolt.
Yeah.
Arguably more so since they knew it was vulnerable to fire by his turn. It just flat out they wasted resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the point of those kind of encounters in a dungeon. That's the entire point.
I am reminded of Game of Thrones, the Battle of the Bastards, when they're talking about what to do, and Sansa says to Jon, just don't do what he wants you to do. The DM wants you to waste your resources. Don't do what he wants you to do.
Yeah, and they even called that out, you know. I'm going to get... Nope, that's what he wants me to do. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. However, I did literally jump off of my yoga ball when Laura says, I cast Toll the Dead. I was like, yes!
Yeah. Yeah, that was...
And then I was so sad when Taliesin was like, I cast Sacred Flame. I'm like, Toll the Dead, man.
Yeah. I mean, that was a counter that should have been done with weapon attacks and cantrips.
Yeah. And I have to say, I love Matt playing Essek in the same vein, in the same resource usage.
Yes.
As the players. Because one, from a DM perspective, the weaker you make the NPCs, the less you have to worry about.
Yeah.
When it comes down to a big fight. Especially spellcasters. So if he can dump all of his high-level shit, it helps him in the sense of logistics. But the players are doing the same kind of things, so it's not obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it's perfect. You don't want to just, oh yeah, I hit it with, all my stuff and take this out for you. You want to be like, it's kind of meet with the level that they're at. Okay, they're wasting Caleb, used fourth level,
Yeah.
I can use this.
Yeah.
So, that way I'm pitching in as much as they're pitching in and still weakening my character.
Yeah.
Although,
to turn around later when they're all trying to get a long rest and use the latest rulings for elves, finishing their long rest in 4 hours.
Campaign 3, all elves in Warforged.
Oh, man. Just salt in the wound. So good. So good. We saw a return of the Glove of Blasting, which we've talked about a
couple of times.
6 weeks ago, I think, is the last time we were like, wait, who has that? And Ford still has it.
Yep.
So we were right. And Matt was very nice in letting Travis use Searing Smite.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes and no. Like, that's the way I do it. If it's within your turn, you can back up to the beginning of your actions, and that's what he says. Well, it's your turn. It's fine. We all, forget things or think things, but then say, the second step because our brains are moving so fast. If it had been, if it had gone to someone else's turn, that's...
So here's why that's important.
Yeah, order of operations is important. I agree. But, you know what I'm saying?
If he had critted on one of those.
Yeah.
It's important to know when he cast the spell. Because technically, he could have attacked, cast the spell, and attacked again.
Yeah.
That's perfectly legitimate. Travis has the habit of rolling both of his attacks at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because he doesn't have abilities like Marisha to modify attack rolls.
Yeah.
In the middle of your turn.
Yeah.
Where she can stun something, now she has advantage.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have that. So him rolling both attacks is fine.
It speeds up the combat round.
Yeah.
I will sometimes roll the attack and damage dice together for each attack rather than multiple attacks.
Yeah.
Just because, okay, if this hits, this is the damage. If it doesn't hit, those dice don't matter anyway.
Yeah. But it was a peek into... Like, everyone has always been... Travis is the tactician. Travis And we've seen little glimpses of that here and there. But this episode is arguably the first time that he's been on it.
Yeah.
Like start to end, and everyone is.
Yeah, and he's saying, no, this is a bad spot and this is why, and this is a bad spot, and Yeah. The other thing as far as order of operations, why I would have given it to him is because he didn't say, hey, can I have cast this after seeing his rolls? He was like, dang it, I was going to do this. He was totally resigned to not having it.
Yeah.
And Matt said, yeah, that's okay. You can go back. If he had been rolled and been like, oh, that's a crit. Can I have cast?
Oh.
I meant to do that. That's a little different,
Yeah.
That's judging player intent.
Well, and his talk out of turn was definitely indicative.
Yes.
That he intended to cast it at the top of the turn.
Yeah.
So I'm not faulting that on it at all. It's just...
Yeah. Those are just the things, like when I run a game, that's what I look at. I'm typically, if it's in your turn, fine.
Yeah.
I may flip that. That's not like a hard house rule for me. Because if you're asking in a way that makes it seem like you're just trying to get extra dice for your crit or something, then I'm like, no, you should have, you should have said it. You had the whole combat round to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and so like if the second dice comes up a crit, and that's the situation, well, you probably would have cast that at the start of your turn. So you apply that to the first damage, not the crit.
Yeah.
Of course, then the Paladin Warlock says, fine, Searing Smite on the first one, my crit, I'll dump a 5th level smite.
Yeah. I'll Divine Smite that.
Yeah. So, after that combat, we have Commune restarted. And she her and Caduceus both, we've talked about this in the past, will often ask questions that are superfluous or they already have the information.
Mm-hmm.
And it strikes me like it's kind of a wasted question. This one, super duper, 2/3 were arguably wasted.
Yeah. The only one I really would have, I would have done a lower time frame on the Tomb Takers.
Well, and we'll see, and that's the thing. That's why...
And they even originally talked about it, are they within 12 hours? And then she upped it to a day. I would have left it at the 12 hours.
Yeah. Well, here's what I would have done.
They should have rested as soon as they'd done the commune. Do the tower, let's take the long rest. We can set up afterwards. We might lose a couple of spell slots for the actual battle, but if the traps work, the traps work.
Well, not only that, if the intent is to find out how much time you have, the first question is, do we have more than 6 hours? The second question is, do we have less than 12? Because now that's a 6-hour window. And then your third question, you can now narrow it from either end. If it's yes or no questions that you have...
I would start with 8 hour because, 8 hours. If we rest now, we get our long rest.
Yeah. And the answer would have been no.
All right.
But was there another exit? Is you could have just gone back and looked.
Yeah.
And Ikathon is a non-issue right now. So I was... but it shows what they're worried about, at the very least. Yeah, Rose. Matt was already... Yeah, they already knew that they were on their way back.
Yeah.
When Jester tried to scry? Or send? I don't remember what spell it was.
Scry.
But he... or no, it was when Bo was meditating on the eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And she got Lucian.
Yeah.
Can I speak to your manager?
Meadow.
Yeah. And he let them know that he was in a hurry. So, yeah. And they knew that they were on the cusp of that week that they thought they had.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But, I mean, either way.
They go into the large open room, though.
Mm-hmm.
And we see more of the blue spheres. They find another house, take a short rest. If they had taken less short rest also, during all this, they would have had that time for a long rest. They might have finished it. So, yeah, it was on the cusp either way.
What they really needed was a genie warlock. Because at this level, hey, which 5 of you want to come in with me? The other people left out can carry the trinket and keep exploring. 10 minutes, we get a short rest. I can pop back in with another group with the rest of you. 10 minutes, you get a short rest while we're moving.
Yeah.
Because at that level, they have the ability to, when they're in there, all they have to do is spend 10 minutes, and they get the effects of, and everyone in there gets the effects of an hour short rest.
Yeah, essentially,
which is great because they're a warlock doing this.
Yeah, yeah, it's essentially a 5-person catnap spell.
Yeah. Well, 6 because it's you and up to your proficiency modifier of people.
They decide to explore the chamber, but only one of them go.
Yeah, and they dump 3 spells into it.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the resource reduction.
Yeah. Which they at the table had already determined that exploring any further was pointless. So let's expend more resources to do it. Yeah. Especially like Travis, as soon as Matt's describing the room, you could see him, he's just like, yeah, it's not happening here. And then
well, think about it. Not only is it just 3 spell slots, 3 resources, it's a 3rd level spell from Caleb, which is a fireball.
Yeah.
Or a lightning bolt or whatever, A 2nd level heal from Jester.
Oh.
And a 2nd level spell from Knot. Not that Knots are, but the heal and the fireball could have been used in the battle.
Yeah.
And they, they're planning on getting a long rest, but given their past encounters with Lucian, and I said this before, they should not have expected to be able to get a long rest.
And I think they, in their heart of hearts, I think that is exactly what they were thinking. Because when Matt was counting down, Laura is always ahead of the curve at the table. And she's like, he's counting down because we're not going to finish the rest. And she's just, because she had spent so much.
Either they did that and went against caution anyway, or being that they're all friends, they're all thinking, no, Matt wouldn't do that to us a 3rd time. He can't be that mean.
Okay. Yes, your DM will be that mean.
Yes. I don't care how close a friend. I don't care if you're married to one of the players. You're going to be that mean. If you've set precedent that this is what this guy does, this is what this guy does.
Yeah. However, a moment of excitement happened for when they hit 16th level. Jester asked again about the healer's kit.
Yes.
Can that only be used to stabilize somebody, or can it give hit points? And Matt says, well, there's a feat that you can take.
Yes, which happened just before 4th level, happened just before 8th level. I'm surprised it didn't happen just before 12th level, and now it's happening shortly before 16. And we've talked about it multiple. Every time they come up on a spot where they can get a feat, we talk about it.
Yeah.
From episode 1, we've talked about the healer's feat, I think, you know, or 2 or 3, you know,
before episode 10 for sure.
Well before they were even close to the 4th level.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Before
because we were talking about it at 4th level when we were discussing what they could do for 4th
Well, yeah, but even before that, you know, when you know, Jester first set up the precedent that she doesn't like to save her spells for healing.
Yeah.
We're like, she needs to take the healer feat at 4th level.
Yeah. If she wants to be the healer.
Yeah.
Which is also why one of the reasons why I think she has resisted taking it. Because she doesn't want to be the healer.
Right. But now they have the healer, and she can be the supplemental with that feat.
Yeah. Because it's real good, because if she had it, she could have restored Caleb 19 to 25 hit points.
Yeah. Which is a huge chunk for him.
Yeah,
You know, his max is at 87, so that's a third of his hit points.
Yeah.
For the equivalent cost of 2 silver, I think. Doesn't it equate to 2 silver a use? I know you had figured out the cost average at one point. It was like 2 or 3 silver.
No, it's 5 silver.
5 silver. Okay, so 5 silver.
It's 5 gold for the healer's kit. And there's 10 uses.
Okay, so 5 silver.
Yeah.
Equivalent of 5 silver, you give him a third of his hit points.
And it is more than a healing potion for 1/10 of the cost.
Yeah.
Well, 100th of the cost per use.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the healer feat is nothing to sneeze at, especially if you're doing gritty healing.
Yes.
My Goliath has it.
Yeah. Anytime I have a character remotely, you know, not even just cleric, but remotely tied to that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, my guy's not a cleric.
Yeah, no, there is a martial type.
Yeah. He's a street fighter, which is a class that I did. There's a video on it. But yeah, they plan some more. Then they go back and set the traps.
Go back and set the traps.
And
order of operations comes up again with Caleb.
Yep. And
or not really order of operations, but realizing when you use your resources.
Yes.
Because he rolled advantage, and then it was like, well, I wasn't supposed to roll advantage. I was supposed to roll 1, and you know.
Yeah. And that's why and arguably him having, like, if he hadn't done that and kept it when he had to roll the Constitution save to not fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, if he had not done that, he would have used it to not trip on the way
Oh,
out.
yeah, that's right.
So.
Yeah.
And he got the one to not fall asleep anyway, because it was only a DC 10.
Yeah. I've forgotten about the athletics check. Yeah. We get a tower tour for Essek.
Yep.
And confirmation that Essek does not have this spell.
Yes. You fuck with this?
And genuine admiration for Caleb.
Yep.
Not only for his skill, but his ethics.
Yeah. Bless you.
Excuse me, thank you. But Caleb admits to that inner darkness still.
Mm-hmm.
And heroes. Yeah, it arguably the Essek and Caleb interaction was the heart of the episode.
Yes.
And it was interesting to me that he basically blew by most of the tower.
Yeah.
Like, that's where we eat, here are the bedrooms. Took him straight to the top.
This is kind of private stuff, and here's the part I want to show you.
Here's the stuff that they had to wait 4 or 5 uses of the tower to see.
And they had to ask.
Yeah.
I think more than once.
But it was nice for Caleb. And I think it was because the top of the tower is essentially the Dunamancy room. It's the room of possibility. And I think in some ways, Caleb sees Essek in that space, that he connects Essek to possibility. And probably not entirely in a positive way.
Yeah.
Because I think when Caleb looks at Essek, that's what I could have been if I hadn't gone crazy.
To a degree, yes. I think part of showing him that was just trying to impress him. We know via confirmation on talks from Liam previously that there is an attraction there.
Yeah.
And so it's, check this out,
I hadn't thought about that, but that's true. The next big moment of the episode is during their rest. Essek finishes his rest.
Yep.
And then begins sort of floating about. And Ford is on watch, sleeping by the door. Essek gets a message.
Mm-hmm.
He goes and wakes up Ford.
And before we get into this, I'm going to say Ford Travis was my MVP. Not just because of this moment, and, but like we said earlier, throughout the whole thing, just being the tactician, kind of, he did go against some people's ideas for the plan and stuff. He did, but he kind of kept it focused on finding the ambush spot.
Yeah.
So.
And having in his mind an idea of what he wanted to do.
Right.
So, yeah, that's true. But Essek comes to him and says...
And this is in the 5th hour.
Yes. They're here. They're asking if they should engage. And Laura, staring at her husband, is shaking her head vigorously.
Yep.
And he says, yes, engage.
Yep.
And then everyone at the table's like, what?
Well, Laura and Liam are obviously upset with that decision. I think it's the wrong one. Sam, Ashley, Marisha, complete shock. But they're for it. They're like, let's see how this plays out. Let's do this thing. Taliesin, little bit of shock, but I think it was more just like he's channeling No Mercy Percy.
Yeah.
But Taliesin is usually the least reactive to things like that.
Yes, that's true.
Just because he just likes to let the wheels spin in the back of his head and just, I want to see where these people are going to go. He's the DM that's a player.
Yeah.
In his reaction to things.
Now, see, Rose, you seem to agree with Scott that It's evidence of evil Ford. And
Okay.
well, in that moment, watching it, I was like, oh, Scott's going to say evil Ford. I had a slightly different take.
Okay, well, let me say mine real quick.
Yes.
Okay. Big thing, it's in the 5th hour. There is no way that it being in the 5th hour that it's going to delay them enough, even if it causes them to take time and be cautious coming in, to let the people finish the short rest, which is his justification to Essek to why he told Essek to send his men to die. If it had been the 7th hour, I'd have been, okay, that's a viable gamble. That's a casualty of war. That does not make him evil. That makes him neutral.
Yeah.
Because it was the 5th hour, that's just, let's kill people. Who gives a shit about them? There's no redeeming, there is absolutely no redeeming value in sending them to engage him. It tips them off, so they are cautious. Maybe they were cautious enough to have avoided the booby traps. You know, and it does not give them the long rest. There was no benefit, only net negative to him doing that.
Yeah.
It is the nail in the coffin. Ford is evil. Boom, mic drop. Ford is evil.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And
Rose definitely agrees with you. And like I said,
Thank you, Rose.
I don't necessarily disagree, but where I came from that in that moment was that's the first time Ford has ever been a captain. Because he has resisted taking charge. He's resisted giving orders, especially ones that might mean somebody's death. This was the first time that he's given an order he knew somebody was going to die because of. And he did it in service to a greater
He did
goal.
it in service to nothing.
No. He did it in service of them getting their rest so that they could save the world. It was incorrect. I agree with your assessment that it was pointless and was going to bear zero fruit. They killed them in less than a minute. In less than 30 seconds. They killed all of them in 4 rounds of combat at most, and only because they had to maybe close distance. I agree. Completely pointless. And he sent them to their death. However,
as a tactician, he should have known that it would not have.
But if he's playing the long game, they can loot Dagon and those Rangers after the end. And get all their money back. They paid him a lot of money.
All of that says is adding fire to the Ford is evil. That's all that argument does. Your best case scenario is he is more evil than I thought he was.
Or more diabolical. Because that's where my brain went. I was like, oh, they can get their shit back.
So,
refund.
I just want to point that out. You are making a better argument for Ford is evil than I did.
Fair. But the interesting thing for me in that scene was Essek actually relayed the order. Because, so this goes back to when they first got to the ruin.
Mm-hmm.
And Essek gave the sending stone not to the lieutenant, but to Dagon.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because we didn't really talk about that very much. It was sort of a throwaway moment. And at the time, I was like, well, Dagon is who the Mighty Nine are familiar with. He will take the Mighty Nine's orders. So if anything happens to him and they want to use the Rangers, maybe that was the calculus he was That's in my head at
Okay.
the time. That's what I said. Okay. But this episode, he relays Ford's order that he knows is going to get these men killed.
Yeah, and he even calls Ford out on it after he makes the call.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if these guys are anything what you say, we just killed those guys for nothing.
Yeah. And Ford says, yep.
And then Ford's like, throws out a justification. Does his Ford thing to be like, no, I'm not evil. I'm trying to get my friends a long rest, to finish their rest.
Yeah. But why did Essek do that? That's what has me, because they spend so much of their time interacting with the Rangers.
Yeah.
Telling them, do not engage. Under no circumstances are you to engage. You see them, run away.
The only thing I can think of is that he suspects at least the captain of being onto him or being sent to keep watch over him because of his war crime past.
Yeah.
And okay.
And that's the only motive that I can think of too.
I trusted these people. They are heroes of the dynasty after all. Gives me an out to get rid of the guy that's watching me and not take the blame for it.
Yeah. So. And that's right up the Drow alley.
Yeah, it is.
And this is a question that we may never get an answer
to. We'll get an answer to it either same episode or the episode after we get to why they tried to kill Orly on the ship. The bad guys that attacked him.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was Orly's secret? Why they went after Orly?
No, that question might be asked at the campaign wrap-up. Why Essek hung his men out to dry is probably not going to be asked. Orly is a beloved NPC because the community helped create him. So why he was the target is relevant to the interests of the community. But why Essek hung these men out to dry, I don't think is relevant to anyone. So that's why I say we would probably never find out.
Unless you or I asked the question, the wrap-up of the question.
Yeah. But we have the start of the ambush that happens.
Yes.
And they kill 3 of them, which is about what I figured would happen.
Yeah. And bloody Cree.
Yeah.
Matt actually uses the term Cree is bloodied.
Yeah.
And this feeds into Ford.
Yeah, I'm loath to critique their actions because I know no one is beating them up more than Travis is, and he's on Talks tonight, so we will probably hear about his frustrations, and he probably will identify the ways that we're going to talk about that they could have done things differently and prevented the escape.
So the only thing I'm going to say then is, and because whether they escaped or not, in my brain, and before, when this happened, I was like, why is this happening? And that is Ford. So Bo goes first, and she does what I think she should have. Launch the AFG, get that out there. Get into position. Okay? The only thing I could argue she should have done differently was she should have gotten right next to one of the 2 so that she could stunning strike with her Sentinel.
Well, bonus action dash with a key point to be adjacent to Cree.
Yeah. That's the only thing I could think differently there. But launching the EFG and moving to get a better position, I'm like, all right. Then Ford goes up, puts a sword to an unconscious individual. Now, yes, granted, we don't know that they're dead, only unconscious, and we find that out later because of the death save thing. But regardless, there's a cleric there standing. You get your ass to that cleric and make the attacks on the person that's still standing.
Yeah.
Because the cleric can't heal him
Yeah.
if the cleric's down.
Yeah.
And the fact that he went and his goal was to kill an unarmed, unconscious man, the paladin thing to do. Just be, it's...
So, I thought similarly to you. On the rewatch in prepping for the show, I don't know that he had the movement to get to Kree. She was very close to the downed one. And this comes down to because they're so far away from the map that Travis says, I want to be adjacent to the guy that's down. And he has some wiggle room with the distance of that spell, the far step. In theory, had he far stepped to just on the outside of the cone, I think he had the movement to step 5 feet and be adjacent to Kree. If he had done that.
Well,
and he asked after he hits the guy and says two deaths failed, Travis considers going after Kree. Because he says, wait, how much? Because he asked, how much movement did I use?
Yeah.
And then he looked and he surmised that he did not have enough to get adjacent to her from where he was.
Yeah. My only thing is that, whether the far step or not, even if he had, moved, dashed, whatever, even if he used this action, he'd used this action to dash, the important thing would be to get adjacent to Kree.
Yeah.
Because worst case scenario, you can make an attack of opportunity.
Yeah.
You can provoke an attack of opportunity. You can change what they do. And it's about battlefield control.
Yeah.
It's easy to say that he should have done this in retrospect, knowing that, but even before that, before I knew Kree had a Cape of the Mountebank, from a tactician standpoint, which Travis is supposed to be the tactician, you don't go after the unconscious people who can't, you go after the action economy, and specifically the healer.
I think he was hoping to goad Lucian into a stand. They hadn't seen the Cape of the Mountebank. They didn't know that a dimension door might be possible. So I think he was trying to goad Lucian into staying.
Okay, so if you're doing that as a paladin warlock, what you do is you bonus action to get into position outside the cone, and then you use your paladin spell of compelled duel to make them want to fight you and not leave.
If he has that prepared.
Which, in my opinion, if you're a paladin, that should always be prepared.
Which Lucian may not be susceptible to, because he has advantage versus charms.
True.
So, Kree was the linchpin.
Right.
In this.
And
Bo, or he, in theory, could have gotten adjacent to her.
Yeah. And my argument is not because of the dimension door. Without that being
just
an option.
The healing to take out
the healer, the one that's up.
Yeah.
And was mentioned by the DM as bloodied. So easier to take out.
Yeah.
Get rid of that action economy. Then you're just dealing with a guy with legendary actions.
Yeah.
Which is a lot easier to take when it's just him than when he's got backup.
Yeah.
So I'm arguing from a tactician, you go after the one who's still up, specifically the wounded one, specifically the healer.
Yeah. And the initiative didn't roll their way either. Because if Kree had gone later in the initiative order, if Ashley had rolled better,
or any
else? Just Ashley.
Yeah.
Just Ashley rolling better. Because she could have 50 feet of movement. She's adjacent to Kree. with her movement.
Yeah.
And to your point, she could even have dashed to Lucian. So that she's there for the attack of opportunity.
If you want to get into it, they haven't used the rules. I don't know if they've incorporated them. But now, with Tasha's out, and it's not a replacement, it's just an additional effect that barbarians have. And I think it's 5th level that they get it. When she does bonus action rage, as part of that bonus action, she can immediately move half her distance. So she could have gotten the 25 feet for the rage and then moved 50 feet.
I doubt that they have talked about that, implementing it.
I don't think they have because they've never discussed it on show. They've never used it.
Yeah.
But that is something that Ashley can do. Because that is rules as written in Tasha's. This is something every barbarian gets now.
Yeah. Which is a nice segue into what I want to call red flags for survival.
Okay.
We talked about what we thought their chances were, our dead pool.
So is this a speculation section?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so before we get to speculation, let's just hit the last note of the show, and that Lucian says, hey, gives him props, that was clever, and collapses the tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to have to deal with that collapsed tunnel, getting through that, which is going to expend more resources. I didn't say it had to expend more resources. I said it's going to expend more resources.
Yeah.
That lizard fight didn't have to expend those resources. It did.
Fair. That's true. So, and that actually does get back to the red flags, so it's still relevant. We talked about how, Rose, they will feel rushed, exactly. So, they will. It's definitely going to be pressure to expend their resources.
Do they go immediately after, or do they take 2.5 hours and finish their long rest? That's the first question. Because rules as written and per Jeremy Crawford, rules as intended, they did not take an hour of strenuous activity. They can finish their long rest. Do they give them that 2.5 hour head start so that they have those resources? Or do they go balls to the wall with minimal resources?
I think they go balls to the walls, and I
agree,
and not necessarily because of the rules is written, like the rules question, but Lucian is there and taunting them,
and they don't know how long the ritual takes.
Yeah,
if they finish that long rest, it could be too late.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. But that's interesting. An interesting temptation. Because that was Travis's big... At the end, he was like, well, it doesn't matter what we do. Can we take a long rest before we...
The only one who can't get a long rest in is Caleb.
Yeah.
Because he intentionally did not take any part of the long rest beforehand.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's a good point. But this gets back to they've talked about tactics. They set brilliant traps and brilliant way to get around the area of effect of the trap. All that was brilliant. In the moment, how can we use the items in our inventory to affect the change that we want was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a little disappointed they didn't use the fluffer nutter.
Yeah.
But the fluffer nutter may come in handy to clear the tunnel.
True. That could be how they cleared the tunnel.
So,
still an expenditure of a resource. I mean, it's just an item. But I mean,
she made it to be used in this.
Had they left it set and not scrapped the idea, that possibly could have taken down Creep.
Yeah, well, and also complicated with the brown mold. Like, having Fluffernutter there was too good of a thing not to.
Right.
So you botched the covering it up. Doesn't matter. They can't see it from the top. And by the time they're climbing down and they can see it, they're at the sigil.
Yeah.
Or symbol. So, yeah. For me, I was like, don't undo it. Leave it. It's going to...
Yeah. I literally hung my head and sighed when he said we're scrapping it.
Yeah. But the biggest thing for me, for survivability, getting back to our Deadpool, is the number of times this episode they didn't know an ability, they forgot the spell, there was just a number of things that I was like, this isn't going to go well. I mean, I'm fairly certain they're still going to beat Lucian. Taking out 3 of the Tomb Takers.
Yeah, it was still huge.
Yeah.
And like they were all saying, that part was huge. I agree with Travis. Ultimately, it was a failure.
Yeah, because Lucian got away.
But
yeah. So Laura thought her duplicate could take an opportunity attack.
Mm-hmm.
It can't.
Correct.
Marisha forgot that she can just hit things once as a bonus action. She doesn't have to expend key points.
Yeah.
And Laura, like the biggest one for me was Laura not using her spiritual weapon in that fight. She cast it and didn't move it, didn't look for range on moving it to attack. And on my initial watch, I completely forgot about the spiritual weapon myself. Mainly because I was so excited she cast Toll the Dead.
I didn't forget.
But normally spiritual weapon is so important for her in her combat tactics that I was just kind of like, wow, why is she?
It hasn't been in a while.
That's also kind of true. Yeah.
And like I mentioned before, when they were on their polymorph kick.
Oh, she finds it.
She finds something that works,
button mashing,
and she repeats that and repeats that and repeats that
until the next thing. Yeah,
until she finds the next thing, which is a viable way. That's how you get signature spells. It's my signature move. Plus, come on, because it's something that's works. It's something that you've got, and you just do it.
Yeah. And yeah, Rose, we didn't touch on Veth killing Otis.
Yeah.
The crossbow bolt in the mouth. Which, yeah. Yeah, kind of brutal, but yeah.
Arguably not as brutal as Ford's kill.
Well, and also not as brutal as the acid in the mouth.
Yeah.
On top of the tower. If we're ranking brutalities.
Fair. I was just going with that scene.
But yes. Also, while we're on that topic of that kill from Ford, I kind of wonder if there wasn't some kind of sense memory in Lucian's body when Molly died.
See, and that was the thing.
Damn close to how
that's something
died.
I forgot, because if you're wanting to goad someone in, I would have taken the chance and I would have just right into the chest and then twist exactly how Molly died. Because if anything's going to trigger him, it's going to be watching his comrade die the way his alter ego died.
Yeah. But Ford was not there for that.
Yes.
Is the other thing. But like in a karmic sense, it was just way too parallel for me.
Yeah. I mean, if I was going to waste the actions doing that to goad him, I would have done it that way.
Yeah. Also, worryingly for me, was Liam not remembering.
Mm-hmm.
Alarm is
A ritual
spell. And wizards don't have to have their ritual spells prepared.
They just have to have it in their book.
Yep. So
that is the one benefit of a wizard.
Yes. And it's the one that nobody else has as a ritual caster. So, yeah. I think clearing the tunnel, probably fluff another if they're in a hurry. But the thing is, any ice in the collapsed debris, Veth can take care of with a cantrip. Because she has shape water.
Yeah.
So, Ford has control water once a day without expending any resources.
Yeah.
So he can do the same thing, just it's all gone now. Stone, little harder, but they have Jester and Yasha to move that stuff.
Yeah.
In the vein of them not remembering stuff and using resources, and it was something that Marisha was very excited about in the beginning of the campaign. Her jeweler's kit.
Yeah.
She should have been able to powder those things, arguably, when they first got to the north.
Yeah.
And if I were at the table, I would have argued with Matt. Well, I did that, he might have pushed back on it. It's like, well, fine, I'll just do it now. But
yeah,
Jester knew she needed the powder gems.
The only thing I'm thinking is that if I argued that with you as my DM, you would have been like, well, you would have pushed back on it.
That's true. I would have. Yeah. So I'm so sad because Marisha brought it up once that she had the toolkit and proficiency in it, and that she could powder gems. And I think she's done it once.
Does she still have it?
As far as I know.
I thought they were keeping it in the bag of holding. I
don't know, but that gets into a whole other can of worms that, like, to me, especially playing Encumbrance,
the devil is in the details.
If it's on your character sheet, if it's in your inventory on your character sheet, you are carrying it.
Yeah. And
you need to figure out how you're carrying it. And if it's not, if you want it in the bag of holding, then it needs to go on whoever's got the bag of holding's character sheet.
Yep.
But that, I don't know. Their inventory stuff. And this gets back to, like, we can talk about order of operations, abilities, and knowing, this is how we enjoy the game.
Yeah.
And how they enjoy the game, largely. Travis is really the only one who likes the war. He likes to kill things kicked indoors and loot. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And the others are there for the RP.
Yeah. Which is a huge thing for me.
Yeah. So learning who has the best stealth and perception combo in the group is not their thing. Whereas generally when we play, there comes a point where we start going, what are your bonuses in these skills? Just so that we have an idea of who's the best in this situation or that.
Yeah.
And because they were so secretive in the beginning, they didn't have that.
Yeah.
Which is why that happens at 14th level. 80 episodes into Caduceus's run.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why those are my red flags for survival, as I like to term them. But I think they are going to win, and it's only a question of does it happen before he completes the ritual.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think we are going to see Fluffernutter clear the tunnel. I hadn't thought of Fluffernutter for clearing the tunnel. I've been thinking, how are they going to do it?
Okay.
I think that's what's going to happen. That's the quickest way.
Yeah, and they don't have to worry about being stealthy.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to go enjoy Travis beat himself up in lieu of the community.
Yep.
We'll see you guys next week.